Okay, so ready to dive in. Today we're looking at something kind of different.
Okay.
It's a single piece of text actually,
Hmm.
but it hints at like a whole bunch of stuff about voting,
Interesting.
specifically about how like some guys are voting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and how they're not exactly broadcasting it.
Keeping it on the down low.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So this text, right, it basically says some men are voting for Trump, but like they're keeping it a total secret, especially, from the women in their lives.
Interesting.
Wives, girlfriends, even family, mothers, sisters.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think about that? Like right off the bat, does that ring true at all?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is this idea of public versus private opinions. Like what we say we believe and what we actually do in the voting booth aren't always the same thing.
Totally. Like
Yeah.
it's almost like leading a double life,
Yeah.
politically speaking.
Exactly. And there's a lot of research on how political views can really impact relationships.
Oh,
Like one study, I think it's from 2016, found that couples who had different political views,
uh-huh.
they were way more likely to fight, argue more,
Yeah.
and just be unhappy in the relationship.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, like, this isn't just about awkward Thanksgiving dinners. We're
Yeah.
talking real relationship problems here.
Exactly.
And this source we have, it actually points to one big reason for the secrecy.
Okay.
It says it's fear of losing sexual access.
Oh, wow.
So what do you think? Do you buy that? Is that too simplistic, or could that actually be a driving factor?
I mean, well, look, I think human behavior is always more complicated than any single explanation, right?
Yeah.
There were probably a bunch of things going on. Fear of conflict, like who wants to fight all the time?
Nobody.
Exactly. And then there's just wanting to fit in, not rocking the boat.
Oh, totally. Like social pressure?
Yeah, like if everyone around you seems to be leaning one way and you're not, it can feel easier to just go along with it.
Yeah, you don't want to be the odd one out. And then, of course, there could be genuine differences in values
Right. Absolutely.
where you agree on some things, but politics just isn't one of them.
Precisely.
And this source, it's interesting because it uses some pretty specific terms to describe the women these men are worried about.
Oh, okay.
It calls them liberal and feminist.
Hmm.
And it's almost like there's a bit of a stereotype baked in there.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
What do you think?
Well, using labels like that, it does kind of imply this assumption, right?
Yeah.
That these women are all going to react a certain way to a Trump vote.
Exactly.
And that's, I think, where it gets dangerous because it simplifies complex political viewpoints.
Right. Like, not every liberal or feminist is going to react the same way to anything.
Exactly. And it's that kind of oversimplification that can shut down communication.
Totally. Like, nobody wants to have a real conversation. They're too afraid of saying the wrong thing.
Right, right.
And speaking of saying the wrong thing, there was this one phrase that really jumped out at me in this text.
Okay, what was that?
It talks about being a real man.
Oh, yeah, I see where you're going with this.
Like, it's tying supporting Trump to this very specific idea of what a man should be.
Absolutely.
Like, it's not just about politics anymore. It's about masculinity, identity, the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think that raises some big questions about how those expectations, those ideas of masculinity play into political choices.
It's almost like it's not even a conscious decision. It's just how you're supposed to be.
Right. It's like it's part of the script for being a certain kind of man.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, like, how much of that is happening in other areas of life, too?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, are we making choices based on who we're supposed to be rather than who we actually are?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
And, this tiny bit of text, it's like a little window into this huge, complicated web of relationships and societal pressures and how all of that shapes our political lives.
So to wrap things up,
Yeah.
I guess what we've learned today is that even something as basic as voting can be influenced by a whole bunch of factors, right?
Absolutely.
Like our relationships, family pressures, social expectations, cultural beliefs, the whole thing.
It's all connected.
And it makes you think, like, how much of what we do is really our own choice and how much is just us playing a role?
Exactly.
So I guess the question for everyone listening is,
Yeah.
think about other areas of your life beyond politics.
Interesting.
Where do you feel that same pressure, that same pull to conform, even if it means hiding your true feelings?
Yeah, that's a great question to think about.
It really is.
Because, understanding those pressures, that's the first step to figuring out who you really are, what you really believe, and how you want to live your life.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks.